He lost everything and was evicted with his children, but the forest held a surprise. Marcus Bennett held his son's hand tightly as he carried on his back all that remained of a lifetime of work. 3 torn plastic bags and an old backpack were now all his possessions after the eviction finally happened on that cold January morning. His 2 children walked silently beside him, still not fully understanding why they had been forced to leave the only home they had ever known. The muddy trail climbing up the Blue Ridge Mountains on the outskirts of Asheville was the only option he had left. Marcus had grown up in those mountains and knew there were old wooden cabins scattered through the woods, built decades ago by farm workers. With only $250 in his pocket and no relatives willing to help, the forest represented his last refuge before he would have to surrender his children to a shelter. "Dad, why can't we go back home?" asked Tyler, just 6 years old, clutching a worn-out teddy bear his mother had given him before she left. "The house isn't ours anymore, son," replied Marcus, trying to keep his voice steady. "But we're going to find a new place." Emily Grace, his 10-year-old daughter, walked a few steps behind in complete silence. Since they had been evicted, she hadn't spoken a single word to her father. The girl's gaze carried a deep hurt, as if she blamed him for the entire situation. Marcus felt the weight of that silent judgment more than the weight of the backpack on his shoulders. The path along the trail grew steeper with each step. The fine drizzle that had been falling since dawn had turned the earth into a slippery, treacherous mess. Tyler stumbled a few times but always got up quickly, as if afraid of slowing the group down. Marcus watched his children trying to be brave and felt his heart breaking. 3 months ago, he was still a machine operator at the textile factory where he had worked for 12 years. The pay wasn't high, but it was enough to keep up the rent on the simple house they lived in and put food on the table. Everything changed when the company shut its doors from one week to the next, leaving 300 employees jobless. The owner had fled abroad, taking with him all the money that was supposed to pay the last 3 months' wages. "Daddy, I'm hungry," murmured Tyler, stopping in the middle of the trail. Marcus stopped too and opened the backpack. Inside there were only 2 slices of stale bread and a half-empty bottle of water. It was all they had managed to take from the house before being thrown out. He broke one of the slices into 3 small pieces and distributed them, saving the other slice for later. "It's not much, but it's what we have for now," he said, trying to sound optimistic. Emily Grace took her piece of bread without saying a word, but Marcus could see tears forming in his daughter's eyes. The girl had always been proud and smart, very mature for her age. She understood perfectly well the gravity of their situation, perhaps even more than her younger brother. They continued climbing the trail for another 2 hours. The weight of the backpack was starting to cause pain in Marcus's back, but he couldn't stop. They needed to find shelter before it got completely dark. The temperature in the mountains dropped drastically at night, and the children didn't have proper clothes for the cold. "Look over there, Dad," exclaimed Tyler, pointing to a structure among the trees. Marcus followed his son's gaze and felt immense relief. It was an old wooden cabin, half hidden by vegetation, but still standing. The structure was clearly abandoned for years, with loose boards and broken shingles, but it offered basic protection from the rain and wind. "Let's see if we can stay here for a few days," he said, addressing Emily Grace directly for the first time. The girl just nodded her head, showing no enthusiasm. Marcus knew she was disappointed in him, and that hurt more than any physical pain. Emily Grace had always admired him and considered him a hero. Now he was just a man who had failed to protect his family. The cabin had only 2 small rooms. The first served as a living room and kitchen with a crude table and 2 wooden benches. The second was a tiny bedroom with a narrow bed without a mattress. The roof was punctured in several spots, allowing the drizzle to drip inside, forming small puddles on the dirt floor. "It's not Disneyland, but it'll do," commented Marcus, trying to make a joke to lighten the heavy mood. Tyler let out a low laugh, but Emily Grace remained serious. Marcus began to organize the space, placing the bags in an area where the roof was still intact. He used some loose boards to cover the larger holes in the walls and spread the clothes they had on the bed to create a more comfortable surface. When night fell, the cold became intense. Marcus gathered his children in his arms on the narrow bed and covered them with all the clothes he could gather. Tyler fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the walk, but Emily Grace stayed awake for hours, staring at the cabin's leaky roof. "Dad," she finally whispered in the dark, "is Mum coming back?" The question hit Marcus like a punch to the gut. Jennifer had abandoned the family 2 years ago when she got a job as a receptionist in New York and became involved with the company's owner. She promised she would send money and visit the children regularly, but the promises never materialized. The last contact had been a quick phone call on Emily Grace's birthday 6 months ago. "I don't know, sweetheart," he answered honestly. "But I'm here and I won't leave you." "But you lost everything," said Emily Grace, her voice choked. "How are you going to take care of us if you lost everything?" Marcus had no answer for that question. He really had lost everything. His job, his home, his dignity. And now he was in an abandoned cabin in the middle of the woods with 2 children to feed and protect. But something inside him refused to give up. "We'll find a way," he said, kissing his daughter's forehead. "I promise." The next morning, Marcus woke to the sound of birds singing outside the cabin. The drizzle had stopped, and rays of sunlight came through the holes in the roof. He carefully got out of bed so as not to wake the children, and walked to the cabin door to assess the situation in the daylight. The view was surprisingly beautiful. The cabin sat in a small clearing surrounded by eucalyptus and pine trees. There was a creek running about 50 meters from the structure, and Marcus could hear the sound of crystal-clear water hitting the rocks. The air was clean and fresh, completely different from the city's pollution. He walked to the creek to fill the water bottle and wash his face. The water was ice-cold but had a pure, refreshing taste. As he bent down to drink, Marcus noticed something strange on the opposite bank of the creek. There were wooden structures partially hidden by vegetation that looked like old boxes or beehives. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Marcus crossed the creek by carefully stepping on the stones and approached the mysterious structures. They were indeed beehives, about 15 of them, arranged in neat rows. The wood was aged and covered in moss, suggesting they had been abandoned long ago. But some still seemed structurally sound. He had learned a bit about beekeeping as a child, visiting his uncle's property in the countryside. He vaguely remembered that bees were valuable not just for honey, but also for pollinating plants. Could some of these hives still be active? Approaching one of the hives that seemed in better condition carefully, Marcus heard a low hum coming from inside the structure. His heart raced with excitement. There were bees there. The hives weren't completely abandoned. "What are you doing?" Marcus turned quickly and saw Emily Grace standing on the opposite bank of the creek, looking at him with a confused expression. The girl had woken up and looked for him when she didn't find him in the cabin. "I found some beehives here," he shouted, trying to contain the excitement in his voice. "I think there are still live bees." Emily Grace crossed the creek with the agility of a child and joined her father. She observed the hives with curiosity, keeping a respectful distance from the structures. "Bees make honey, right, Dad?" "They do. And honey is worth money," replied Marcus, finally allowing a bit of hope to enter his voice. "But do you know how to handle bees?" It was a valid question. Marcus knew very little about beekeeping beyond what he had seen on his uncle's property as a teenager. Handling bees without proper knowledge could be dangerous, especially with the children around. But it was the first real opportunity he had glimpsed since they had lost everything. "I'll learn," he said with determination. They returned to the cabin, where Tyler was still sleeping soundly, hugging his teddy bear. Emily Grace helped her father take inventory of everything they had. Besides clothes, there was a lighter, a small knife, some plastic plates and utensils. It was very little, but Marcus began to make a mental list of everything they would need to survive there for at least a few weeks. The first priority was food. The last slice of bread wouldn't even last until the end of the day. Marcus knew there were wild berries in the area, blueberries, Suriname cherries, and guavas, but they would need to find them. They also needed materials to improve the cabin's conditions, especially to protect against the rain. "Emily, do you remember anything your teacher taught about plants we can eat?" The girl thought for a few moments before answering. I remember she talked about cashews, guavas, and mangoes, and that there are some leaves you can use to make tea when someone is sick. Very good. Today we're going to explore the surroundings a bit and see what we can find. When Tyler finally woke up, they went out together to explore the area around the cabin. The forest was full of life. Squirrels ran among the branches, colorful birds flew from tree to tree, and small insects buzzed among the wildflowers. For the children, who had spent their whole lives in the city, it was like discovering a new world. "Look, Dad," shouted Tyler, pointing to a tree laden with small red fruits. It was a Suriname cherry tree, exactly what Marcus had hoped to find. The fruits were ripe and sweet, offering the first fresh food they had had since leaving home. The children ate with pleasure, staining their fingers and clothes with the red juice of the fruits. Further on, they found a guava tree with yellow fruits and some blueberry bushes. Emily Grace showed she had a good memory for locating fruit trees, creating a mental map of the available food resources. Tyler, in turn, showed fascination with the small animals they found along the way. During the exploration, Marcus also located an area where they could collect dry firewood to make a fire. The temperature in the mountains dropped drastically during the early morning hours, and they would need heating. He taught the children to identify suitable wood and to organize it by size for different uses. In the late afternoon, they returned to the cabin with their arms full of fruit and firewood. Marcus managed to light a small fire inside the cabin, in a corner where there were stones that served as protection. The smoke rose through the holes in the roof, creating natural ventilation. "Dad, are we going to live here forever?" asked Tyler, sitting close to the fire. "No, son. This is just temporary, until we can get ourselves organized again." "But I'm liking it here," said the boy, surprising his father. "It's better than the city. There are birds, there's fruit, and there's no car noise." Emily Grace also seemed more relaxed than she had been in recent days. The change of environment and the physical activity of exploring had improved her mood considerably. For the first time since the eviction, she directed some spontaneous words to her father. "The bees you found, do you think we can get honey from them?" "I don't know yet," Marcus answered honestly. "First, I need to learn more about how to handle them, but it could be our chance to earn some money." "How?" "Organic honey is worth a lot of money at the city's fairs and markets. If we can produce it, we can sell it." The idea excited Emily Grace, who had always been an intelligent and practical child. She began asking questions about how many hives there were, how much honey each could produce, and how much money they could earn. Marcus didn't have precise answers, but his daughter's curiosity encouraged him. That night, they slept better than the night before. The fruit had satisfied their hunger, the fire warmed the cabin, and for the first time since they lost their home, they had a plan for the future. It was an uncertain and risky plan, but it was better than the feeling of total despair Marcus had carried for months. The next morning, he woke with renewed determination. He needed to learn about beekeeping as quickly as possible, but to do that, he would need help. In the nearest town, Asheville, there should be libraries, bookstores, or people with knowledge on the subject. The problem was that going to town would take the entire day walking, and he couldn't leave the children alone in the forest. "Emily, do you feel safe staying here with your brother for a few hours?" The girl hesitated before answering. She was mature, but she was still a 10-year-old child. "For how long?" "About 4 or 5 hours. I need to go to town to get information about the bees. You would stay here near the cabin, you can't wander off." "I'll take care of Tyler," she said, taking on a responsibility that shouldn't have been hers. Marcus felt terrible for putting so much weight on his daughter's shoulders, but he saw no alternative. He left detailed instructions for the children, not to leave the cabin area, not to play with the fire, to eat the fruit they had collected if they felt hungry, and to hide inside the cabin if any strange animal appeared. The walk to Asheville was longer and more tiring than Marcus remembered. He had no money for public transportation, so he had to make the entire journey on foot, descending the mountain trail and then walking along the paved roads until he reached the city center. When he finally reached the public library, he was already exhausted and hungry. The librarian, a lady with white hair and thick glasses, received him kindly despite his disheveled appearance. Marcus explained that he was researching beekeeping and she directed him to a specific section on agriculture and animal husbandry. The books were a revelation. Marcus discovered that beekeeping was a much more complex activity than he had imagined. There were specific techniques for managing the hives, necessary protective equipment, methods for extracting honey without harming the bees, and important sanitary practices. The more he read, the more he realized how much he didn't know. But he also found encouraging information. Organic honey truly had a valuable market, especially in the greater New York area. A single productive hive could yield between 15 and 20 kilograms of honey per year, and each kilogram could sell for between $20 and $40, depending on quality and certification. Marcus made detailed notes on a piece of paper he found in the library. He copied information about the bee's life cycle, harvest periods, signs indicating healthy hives, and the basic equipment needed. When it began to get dark, he knew he needed to get back to the children. The walk back was even more difficult, as he was climbing the mountain in the dark. Marcus used the lighter to illuminate the path on the most dangerous stretches of the trail, worried about the possibility of getting lost or hurt. If something happened to him, the children would be completely helpless. When he finally reached the cabin, it was almost midnight. Emily, Grace, and Tyler were sleeping embraced on the bed, but woke up as soon as they heard their father arrive. "Dad!" shouted Tyler, jumping out of bed and running to hug him. "Were you okay? Did anything happen?" "No," replied Emily Grace. "We ate the fruit, played a little, and Tyler slept the whole afternoon." Marcus felt immense pride in his daughter's maturity. She had responsibly looked after her brother and kept everything under control in his absence. He told the children what he had learned at the library, showing them the notes he had made. "So it's possible to make money with the bees?" asked Emily Grace. "It's possible, but it won't be easy. We need to learn a lot and get some basic equipment." "What kind of equipment?" Marcus consulted his notes. "Protective clothing, a smoker, tools for opening the hives, and containers for storing the honey." "That must cost a lot of money," observed Emily Grace, ever practical. It was true, beekeeping equipment wasn't cheap, and Marcus had only $200 left in his pocket. He needed to find a way to get the necessary materials without spending money he didn't have. During the following days, Marcus implemented a daily routine with the children. In the morning, they explored the forest in search of food and observed the hives from a distance. In the afternoon, he taught Emily Grace and Tyler the information he had learned at the library. At night, they planned the next steps around the campfire. Emily Grace demonstrated a natural aptitude for organizing information. She created rudimentary drawings of the hives, listed the materials they would need to obtain, and even began making basic calculations about production potential and revenue. Tyler, in turn, showed an almost scientific curiosity about bee behavior. "Dad, why do bees make honey?" the boy asked one afternoon. "It's how they store food for times when there are no flowers," explained Marcus, repeating information he had read in the books. "And why don't they get mad when we take the honey?" It was a harder question. "They do get mad, Tyler. That's why we need special clothing and have to do everything very carefully." The observations of the hives revealed that at least 8 of the 15 structures showed bee activity. Marcus could see the worker bees regularly going in and out, carrying pollen on their legs. This indicated the colonies were healthy and active. The challenge would be managing them without the proper equipment. One morning, while collecting water from the stream, Marcus heard human voices approaching along the trail. His first instinct was panic. They could be authorities looking for them, or people with bad intentions. He ran back to the cabin and told the children to hide behind the structure. The voices became clearer as they got closer. It was an older woman talking to herself, apparently speaking to someone on a cell phone. "No, honey, I'm fine. I just need some time alone to think. I know you worry, but sometimes a person needs silence, you know." Marcus peeked through a crack in the cabin wall and saw a woman about 60 years old walking along the trail. She carried a small bag and wore simple hiking clothes. She didn't seem to pose a danger, but he kept the children hidden as a precaution. The woman stopped near the stream and sat on a large rock. She hung up the phone and sat there quietly for several minutes, just watching the water flow and listening to the sounds of the forest. Marcus could see she was crying softly. "Mum, You have to accept that Dad is gone, she said to herself in a low voice. Being stuck in the past won't bring him back. The situation touched Marcus's heart. It was obvious the woman was going through some kind of grief or emotional difficulty. He wrestled with staying hidden to protect the children and offering some kind of comfort to this woman who clearly needed help. Tyler, you and your sister stay hidden here, he whispered. Don't come out until I get back. Marcus left the cabin calmly and approached the woman, making noise on purpose so as not to startle her. Good morning, he said in a respectful tone. The woman turned, startled, but calmed down when she saw he posed no threat. Good morning, she replied, quickly wiping away her tears. I'm sorry. I didn't know anyone was around here. No need to apologize. It's just that I heard you talking and noticed you seemed a bit upset. Are you okay? The simple question broke through the woman's emotional defenses. She began to cry again, but this time without trying to hide it. My husband passed away 3 months ago, she said through tears. We used to come here every week to walk together. It was his favorite place. Marcus felt a pang in his heart. He knew what it was like to lose someone important, although in his case the loss was due to abandonment, not death. I'm very sorry for your loss, he said sincerely. Thank you, it's very hard. We were married for 42 years. I don't know how to live without him. Do you have children, family to support you? I have a daughter, but she lives in New York and has her own life. She worries about me, but she can't be babysitting me all the time. The conversation was interrupted by Tyler's voice, shouting from behind the cabin. Dad, Emily Grace is sick. Marcus immediately ran to where he had left the children and found Emily Grace sitting on the ground, her face pale and clammy. The girl seemed dizzy and nauseous. What happened? He asked, kneeling beside his daughter. I don't know, replied Tyler, frightened. She was fine and suddenly got like this. The woman had followed Marcus and also came closer to help. Did she eat anything unusual today? Asked the woman, who clearly had experience caring for people. Just the same fruits we've been eating for days, replied Marcus. It could be dehydration or lack of proper nutrition, diagnosed the woman. This girl is very thin. It was true. Emily Grace had visibly lost weight since they left home. The diet based only on wild berries wasn't providing all the nutrients a growing child needed. I have some sandwiches and water in my bag, the lady offered, and a little motion sickness remedy I always carry. Marcus hesitated to accept help from a stranger, but Emily Grace's condition worried him greatly. The lady seemed to understand his hesitation. My name is Dorothy Patterson. I'm a retired nurse. I worked at St. Vincent Memorial Hospital in Asheville for 30 years. You can trust me. Marcus Bennett, he replied. And these are my children, Emily Grace and Tyler. Mrs. Dorothy cared for Emily Grace with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades treating sick children. She gave the girl water to drink slowly, offered a ham sandwich, and massaged her temples to help with the dizziness. Within minutes, Emily Grace was already feeling better. Are you living here in the forest? Asked Mrs. Dorothy, trying to understand the situation. Marcus hesitated again, but decided it would be better to be honest with someone who had shown such kindness. Temporarily, we lost our home and had nowhere to go, Mrs. Dorothy looked around, noticing the dilapidated cabin, the children's simple clothes, and the clear lack of basic resources. Her maternal instinct was triggered immediately. How long have you been here? A week. And what do you plan to do? You can't live like this indefinitely, especially with children. I found some abandoned beehives, explained Marcus. I'm trying to learn beekeeping to produce and sell honey. Mrs. Dorothy was surprised by the answer. It was clear Marcus wasn't just lamenting his situation, but actively trying to find a solution. My husband was a beekeeper, she said after a few moments of silence. Really? He had 15 hives in the backyard of our house in town. He sold honey at the farmer's market every Tuesday and Saturday. It was more of a hobby than a business, but it provided good extra income. Marcus felt his heart race. This could be the answer to his prayers. Do you know anything about handling bees? I helped him sometimes, but the one who really understood was William. Since he died, the poor bees have been abandoned. I don't even have the courage to go near the hives. But do you still have the equipment? I have everything. Suits, smoker, tools, honey extractor. It's all stored in the shed behind the house. I didn't know what to do with it. An idea began to form in Marcus's mind. Perhaps there was a way to help Mrs. Dorothy deal with her bees while he learned about beekeeping. Would you consider a proposal? He asked carefully. What kind of proposal? I could take care of your bees, learn the trade, and split the profit from selling the honey. You'd keep the larger share, of course, since the bees and equipment are yours. Mrs. Dorothy considered the proposal for a few minutes. It was obvious she was lonely and needed purpose in her life. Taking care of her husband's bees could be a way to honor his memory. Where would you live? She asked. Right here in the forest. It's not very comfortable, but... Nonsense, interrupted Mrs. Dorothy. I won't let these children living in a cabin in the woods. You can stay in the cottage at the back of my yard. It's where William kept his tools, but it has a room and a small bathroom. It can be adapted. Marcus couldn't believe what he was hearing. It was as if all his luck had changed in a matter of minutes. You don't even know me. How can you trust me like this? I know how to recognize character in people, replied Mrs. Dorothy confidently. You didn't abandon your children when things got tough. That tells me a lot about who you are. But what if I can't learn properly? What if I can't take care of the bees? We'll figure that out by trying. My William always said that bees are creatures that teach patience and humility. If you have those two qualities, they'll accept you. Emily Grace, who had fully recovered from her discomfort, followed the entire conversation attentively. When Mrs. Dorothy finished speaking, the girl addressed her directly. Are you sure you want to do this? We have no way to pay. Smart girl, said Mrs. Dorothy, smiling for the first time since she had arrived. I'm not doing charity. If your father can produce honey, everyone will benefit. And if he can't? Then you'll at least have a roof over your heads and food on the table while he tries to figure something else out. Marcus was deeply moved. After weeks of total despair, a stranger had appeared offering exactly what they needed. It seemed too good to be true. Mrs. Dorothy, are you sure? I don't want you to regret it later and... Listen here, young man, she interrupted firmly. Since my husband died, I wake up every day not knowing what the point is of getting out of bed. Maybe taking care of you and the bees will give me a reason to keep living. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The move to Mrs. Dorothy's house happened that same day. The property was in the rural area of Asheville, on a 2-hectare plot with a main house, a barn, and the small back building where Marcus and the children settled. It wasn't luxurious, but compared to the forest cabin, it seemed like a palace. The back room was about 20 square meters, with a small window, a sink, and a tiny bathroom. Mrs. Dorothy helped organize the space with some furniture she had stored. 2 single beds, a small table, chairs, and even a portable gas stove. Now you can cook properly, she said, showing a small refrigerator that was in the barn, and the children need to go back to school as soon as possible. Emily Grace and Tyler explored the property with delight. There was a vegetable garden with greens and vegetables, fruit trees, chickens roaming the yard, and the 15 beehives lined up at the back of the property, surrounded by flowering vegetation that attracted the bees. Dad, this is much better than our old house, commented Tyler, running between the trees. It was true. The house they lived in before was small, with no yard, located on a noisy street. Here the children had space to play, fresh air to breathe, and a variety of outdoor activities. Mrs. Dorothy prepared a full meal for them that first afternoon: rice, beans, roasted chicken, salad, and even a dessert of dulce de leche. It was the first proper meal they'd had in weeks. Marcus watched his children eat with pleasure and felt immense gratitude for that generous woman. Mrs. Dorothy, how can I thank you for all this? By taking good care of my bees, she replied simply, and letting me take care of these children a little. It's been a long time since this house has heard children's laughter. After lunch, Mrs. Dorothy took Marcus to see the barn where her husband kept all the beekeeping equipment. It was impressive. There were 3 complete suits with veils, thick gloves, smokers, special tools for opening the hives. extra boxes to expand the hives, and even an electric centrifuge for extracting the honey. "My William spent a fortune buying all this," commented Mrs. Dorothy, running her hand lovingly over the equipment. "He said bees were a long-term investment. How much did he make selling honey?" "It depended on the time of year, but in the good months it was about $1,500. It wasn't much, but he loved the work." $1,500 a month would be a miracle for Marcus. It was more than half of what he earned at the textile factory, and if he could learn the trade properly, he might even expand production in the future. "When can we start?" he asked, eager to learn. "Early tomorrow. First you'll put on the coveralls and learn to light the smoker. Then we'll open a hive for you to see how it works inside." That night, Marcus could barely sleep from anxiety. It was the first time in months he felt genuine hope about the future. The children seemed happy and safe. They had adequate food and shelter, and he finally had a real opportunity to rebuild his life. Emily Grace was also excited about the prospects. During dinner, she had asked several smart questions about the honey business: how much it cost to produce each pound, where they sold it, how they guaranteed quality, and if there was enough demand in the market. "Are we going to get rich?" asked Tyler with the innocence of his age. "Rich maybe not," replied Marcus, laughing, "but we're going to have our own house again, that I promise." The next morning, Mrs. Dorothy woke Marcus before sunrise. The best time to handle bees was early morning or late afternoon, when they were less active. Marcus put on the white coveralls, placed the protective mask and pulled on the thick gloves. He felt like an astronaut preparing for a space mission. "Remember, slow and gentle movements," instructed Mrs. Dorothy. "Bees don't like sudden movement or strong smells. That's why you can't wear perfume or deodorant when you're going to work with them." The smoker was an ingenious piece of equipment, a metal container where organic material was burned to produce thick, white smoke. The smoke calmed the bees, making them focus on protecting the honey instead of attacking intruders. "My husband used sawdust, dry leaves, and sometimes a little bit of paper," explained Mrs. Dorothy, as she helped Marcus light the smoker. Approaching the first hive was terrifying. Marcus could hear the intense buzzing of thousands of bees inside the wooden structure. His hands trembled as he held the tools, but Mrs. Dorothy encouraged him with patience. "Calm down, they can sense when you're nervous. Take a deep breath and go slow." Marcus applied smoke to the hive entrance and waited a few minutes before removing the top lid. What he saw inside was absolutely fascinating. Hundreds of bees working in an organized manner on perfect hexagonal wax combs, some full of golden honey, others with developing larvae. "This is incredible," he whispered. "It's pure organization," commented Mrs. Dorothy. "Each bee knows exactly what its role is in the colony, workers, drones, and the queen. It's a perfect society." During the first 2 weeks, Marcus learned the basic fundamentals of beekeeping under Mrs. Dorothy's careful supervision. He discovered how to identify a healthy hive by the signs of bee activity, how to recognize diseases or pests that could harm the colony, and how to expand a strong hive by adding extra boxes to increase production. Emily and Tyler followed their father's learning with genuine interest. The girl created a notebook where she wrote down everything they observed: how many bees entered and left each hive in set periods, which plants attracted the bees most on the property, and even the ideal weather for beekeeping work. Tyler developed an almost magical connection with the bees. He could approach the hives without protective gear, and the bees would simply ignore him. It was as if they recognized he posed no threat. "That boy has a gift," commented Mrs. Dorothy, watching Tyler sit calmly near a beehive, while the bees flew around him without showing any aggression. The children were also enrolled in the local public school. Emily Grace adapted quickly and was soon among the best students in her class. Tyler took a little longer to adjust, but gradually made new friends and began to enjoy the school routine. Mrs. Dorothy proved to be an extraordinary maternal figure. She helped the children with their homework, sewed new clothes when the old ones became too small, and always had interesting stories to tell during meals. The house had regained the joy it lost with her husband's death. Marcus noticed how their presence had transformed Mrs. Dorothy as well. She had started smiling regularly again, cooked with pleasure, and had a sparkle in her eyes that wasn't there when they first met in the forest. It was as if both families had found exactly what they needed in each other. At the end of the first month, it was time for the first honey harvest. Marcus was nervous, as this would be the first real test of everything he had learned. With Mrs. Dorothy watching and guiding, he removed the honey-filled combs from 3 different hives. The extraction process was laborious but rewarding. First, they uncapped the combs, removing the thin layer of wax that sealed each cell. Then, they placed the combs in the electric extractor, which spun at high speed, forcing the honey out by centrifugal force. Finally, they filtered the honey to remove impurities and stored it in glass containers. The result was exceptional: 42 pounds of pure golden honey, with an intense floral aroma and an unmatched flavor. It was far more than Marcus had dared to hope for from the first harvest. "This honey is premium quality," assessed Mrs. Dorothy, tasting a sample. "My William would be proud." Emily Grace had calculated the numbers in advance. 42 pounds of honey, sold for $25 a pound at the local farmer's market, would yield over $1,000. It was almost the salary Marcus earned at the factory, but produced in just 1 day of work. The Asheville Farmers Market happened every Wednesday and Saturday in the town's central square. Mrs. Dorothy had kept her husband's stall reserved, paying the monthly fee even without using it, hoping that one day she would sell honey again. "The time has come to reopen the stall," she announced, smiling. The first day of selling was exciting and nerve-wracking. Marcus arranged the jars of honey at the stall following Mrs. Dorothy's instructions, created handmade labels explaining the organic origin of the product, and waited for customers. Emily Grace and Tyler accompanied him, curious to see how selling worked. "Young man, is this honey really from this region?" asked an elderly lady, the first customer of the morning. "Yes, ma'am. Produced right here in Asheville with no chemicals. The bees feed only on the nectar from local flowers." "How much per pound?" $25. "That's a bit expensive, isn't it?" Marcus hesitated, unsure how to negotiate. But Emily Grace approached the customer with the confidence of an experienced little salesperson. "Ma'am, we can give you a spoon to try," offered the girl. "Good honey tastes different from processed honey." The woman tasted a small amount, and her expression changed immediately. "Wow, this is real honey, very different from the ones they sell at the supermarket." "It's because our bees eat only the natural nectar from the flowers," explained Tyler, repeating what he had learned from his father. "There's no sugar or anything artificial mixed in." The lady bought 2 pounds and recommended the honey to other people passing by the stall. In just a few hours, Marcus had sold 15 pounds, surprising even Mrs. Dorothy with the success of their first sales experience. "You two have a knack for business," she commented on the way back home. "Emily Grace saved the day," admitted Marcus. "I was at a loss to explain why the honey cost more." "It's that people need to understand their buying quality," said Emily Grace seriously. "Just like when Mom used to buy more expensive clothes because they lasted longer." The mention of their mother created a moment of silence in the car. Jennifer had given no news since they lost the house, despite Marcus having tried to contact her several times to inform her of the new situation. It was as if she had simply erased the family from her life. In the following months, the honey business grew steadily. Marcus and Mrs. Dorothy established an efficient routine. He took care of the hives and production, she managed sales and customer relations. The children helped after school, creating a family business environment. Emily Grace demonstrated a special talent for the administrative side. She created an inventory control system, recorded expenses and income in a detailed notebook, and even suggested improvements to the production process. Tyler specialized in the direct care of the bees, developing an almost supernatural intuition for identifying problems in the hives. Mrs. Dorothy proposed expanding the operation by building 10 more hives on the property. With 25 productive hives, they could quadruple production and perhaps even sell honey to specialty stores and restaurants in the region. "But that will require investment," warned Marcus. "What if it fails?" "Life is all about risk," philosophized Mrs. Dorothy. "My husband always said nothing ventured, nothing gained." The investment was made gradually, with the profits from honey sales being reinvested in the purchase of new hives and equipment. Emily Grace tracked the entire financial process, learning practical concepts of management and accounting that children her age rarely encounter. One day, while working on the hives, Marcus received an unexpected call on his old cell phone. It was Jennifer, his ex-wife, calling after almost a year of total silence. "Marcus," the voice sounded hesitant on the other end of the line. "Jennifer, how did you get my number? I changed phones months ago. I got it from a neighbor on our old street. She told me that you lost the house." "We lost it a long time ago. You disappeared and didn't know anything about it." There was an awkward silence before Jennifer continued. "I wanted to know how the children are, if they're okay." "The children are great. Studying, eating well, living in a good place. Without your help, by the way." "Marcus, I know you must be angry with me, but—" "Angry?" he interrupted, trying to control the emotion in his voice. "Jennifer, you abandoned your children. When Emily Grace asks about her mother, I have to make up excuses because I don't know what to tell her. I was lost, confused. The marriage with David didn't work out. I lost my job, and now you want to come back? Is that it?" "I wanted at least to see the children. Talk to them." Marcus felt a mix of anger and pity. Part of him wanted to protect the kids from another disappointment, but another part knew the children had the right to decide about their relationship with their mother. "They live with me, Jennifer. If you want to see them, it will have to be on my terms." "I accept any condition. I just want a chance to explain to them that I never stopped loving you." Marcus arranged a meeting for the following Saturday at the square where the market was held. It would be neutral ground in public, where the children would feel safe and he could control the situation. During the week leading up to the meeting, Marcus spoke carefully with Emily Grace and Tyler about their mother's call. The reactions were different. Tyler was excited about the possibility of seeing his mother again, while Emily Grace showed skepticism and even resentment. "She'll leave again," said the girl bitterly. "Just like the last time she promised to come get us." "Maybe she's changed," suggested Marcus, trying to remain neutral. "People don't change, Dad. My teacher said character is formed in childhood and doesn't change after that." Emily Grace's maturity sometimes frightened Marcus. The girl had been forced to grow up too fast because of the circumstances, and now she displayed a wisdom that should belong to adults, not an 11-year-old child. Mrs. Dorothy advised Marcus to keep an open mind, but protect the children from exaggerated expectations. "Let her prove she's changed through her actions, not her words," suggested the lady. "And if she disappoints the children again, at least they'll be sure they tried their best." Saturday arrived with a palpable tension in the air. Marcus, Emily Grace, and Tyler dressed carefully to go to the market, but it was obvious no one could focus on normal activities. Even the bees seemed to sense the nervous energy in the environment. Jennifer was waiting in the square when they arrived, sitting on the same bench where they used to meet as teenage sweethearts. She had lost a lot of weight, had her hair cut differently, and wore simple clothes that Marcus didn't remember seeing before. It was obvious she had also been through hard times. Tyler immediately ran to hug his mother, but Emily Grace stayed close to her father, watching the scene with emotional distance. Jennifer cried as she hugged her son, repeating several times how much he had grown and how much she missed him. "Emily, aren't you going to give Mommy a hug?" asked Jennifer, extending her arms to her daughter. The girl hesitated for several seconds before slowly approaching. The hug was brief and formal, more a polite greeting than a display of genuine affection. "You've gotten so big, so beautiful," commented Jennifer, trying to break the ice. "How's school?" "Fine," replied Emily Grace in a single word. "And you, Tyler, made new friends?" Tyler began excitedly telling her about the new school, about the bees, about Mrs. Dorothy, and about all the adventures they'd had since leaving the old house. Jennifer listened attentively, but Marcus could tell she was shocked by how much of her children's lives she had missed. "Bees?" she asked when Tyler mentioned his fascination with the insects. "Daddy became a beekeeper," explained the boy. "We produce honey and sell it at the market. It's really cool. And we live in a really nice house with a big yard and everything," added Emily Grace, in a tone that seemed to want to make it clear they were fine without their mother. Jennifer tried to ask more questions about their new life, but the children's answers became increasingly short and direct. It was obvious that, especially Emily Grace, was building an emotional barrier. I brought you some presents, said Jennifer, taking 2 bags from her purse. They were toys and clothes that seemed to have been bought in a hurry, without much knowledge of the children's current tastes. Tyler thanked her politely, but Emily Grace just looked at the gifts without showing interest. "Emily, didn't you like what Mommy brought?" asked Marcus, trying to mediate the situation. "I did," lied the girl. "Thank you." The meeting lasted about 2 hours, but it felt like an eternity. Jennifer desperately tried to reconnect with her children, asking about their interests, shared memories, and plans for the future. But it was obvious there was a huge emotional distance, especially with Emily Grace. When it was time to leave, Jennifer asked to speak privately with Marcus, while the children played at the nearby playground. "They hate me," she said, beginning to cry. "They don't hate you, Jennifer, but you need to understand that a lot has happened since you left. I know I made a terrible mistake. I shouldn't have abandoned you all. You don't need to explain yourself to me, it's to them. How do I do that? How do I regain the trust of my own children?" Marcus reflected for a few moments before answering. "By being present. Not promises, not gifts, not pretty words. Constant and reliable presence. Would you let me spend more time with them? Maybe some weekends? That doesn't depend just on me. They have to want it." When they returned home, Mrs. Dorothy immediately noticed the heavy atmosphere they carried. She didn't ask questions directly, but prepared the children's favorite snack and created a welcoming environment so they could process the emotions from the meeting. "How did it go?" she asked discreetly to Marcus in the kitchen. "Complicated. Emily Grace is hurt, Tyler was confused, and Jennifer is full of regret." "And you? How do you feel?" "I don't know. Part of me feels sorry for her, but another part will never forgive what she did. Sometimes people make bad choices and take a while to realize it. The important thing is that now she wants to try to fix things. Is it even possible to fix? Some things, once broken, don't glue back together." Mrs. Dorothy watched Emily Grace playing quietly with Tyler in the backyard. "That girl is strong, but she's carrying a lot of hurt for her age. If Jennifer has really changed, maybe it would be good for Emily Grace to learn to forgive. If she hasn't, at least she'll know for sure." During the following weeks, Jennifer began calling regularly to speak with the children. Tyler was always excited about the calls, telling details of his day and making plans for the next meeting. Emily Grace participated in the conversations, but in a formal way, without showing genuine enthusiasm. Jennifer asked to visit the house where they lived, to meet Mrs. Dorothy and see up close how they lived. Marcus hesitated initially, as he considered that space a safe sanctuary for the children, but he ended up agreeing after talking with Emily Grace and Tyler. The visit happened on a Sunday afternoon. Jennifer arrived carrying bags with ingredients to prepare a special lunch, an obvious attempt to win back her children's affection through food. Mrs. Dorothy received her politely, but maintaining a respectful distance. "Your house is beautiful," commented Jennifer, observing the well-kept garden and the beehives at the back of the property. "It was my late husband's," replied Mrs. Dorothy curtly. "Now it's ours." Jennifer visited the quarters where Marcus and the children lived, clearly surprised by the comfortable and organized conditions. It was obvious she had imagined a much worse situation. "You've made a very nice home here," she admitted. "We've always done our best with what we had," replied Marcus. During lunch, Jennifer tried to integrate into the family conversations, but it was evident there was an established dynamic she was not part of. Mrs. Dorothy, Marcus, Emily Grace, and Tyler had their own way of interacting, with inside jokes, shared references, and a harmony that Jennifer couldn't penetrate. "Can I see the bees up close?" asked Jennifer, in an attempt to show interest in her children's new hobbies. Tyler was excited by the opportunity to show the beehives to his mother. He explained in detail how the colonies worked, pointed out different types of bees, and demonstrated how they didn't attack him even when he approached without protection. "He has a special gift," commented Mrs. Dorothy. "The bees recognize he's not a threat." Jennifer watched her son with pride and sadness. It was obvious she had missed important moments in Tyler's personality development. The boy had discovered a passion and developed skills she knew nothing about. "What about you, Emily? Do you like the bees too?" asked Jennifer. "I prefer the numbers part," replied the girl. controlling how much we produce, how much we sell, how much we profit. She's our official accountant, joked Marcus. Everything has to get her approval. Emily Grace showed her mother the notebook where she recorded all the financial activities of the business. Jennifer flipped through the pages with admiration, impressed by her daughter's organization and maturity. "You've become a little businesswoman," commented Jennifer. "I learned out of necessity," replied Emily Grace, with a coldness that cut through Jennifer's heart. The sentence was like a silent accusation. Emily Grace was making it clear she had been forced to grow up and take on responsibilities because of her mother's abandonment. Jennifer swallowed her tears and tried to change the subject. When the visit ended, Jennifer asked to speak with Marcus alone again. They walked to the entrance of the property, away from the children and Mrs. Dorothy. "How can I win back Emily Grace?" she asked directly. "Time and patience. She won't forgive overnight. What if she never forgives me? Then you'll have to live with the consequences of your choices." Jennifer began to cry, finally understanding the magnitude of what she had lost. "I was young, confused. I thought I deserved something better than a life of financial hardship." "Jennifer, I understand you were unhappy. What I don't understand is how you managed to abandon your children. I thought it would be temporary, that once I got settled, you would all come live with me. But you never called. You never sent money. You never asked if they were okay. I was ashamed. With each passing day, it got harder to make contact." Marcus understood that Jennifer had sunk into a cycle of guilt and shame that had completely paralyzed her. It wasn't a justification, but at least it was an explanation. "What do you want now?" he asked. "I want to be a mother again, even if it's little by little, even if it's difficult. What if I say no? Then I'll respect your decision. But please, give me a chance." Marcus looked toward the house, where he could see Emily Grace and Tyler playing in the yard with Mrs. Dorothy. They were three people who had become his family, who had been by his side during the worst period of his life. Jennifer was a stranger, trying to insert herself into a dynamic that worked perfectly without her. But she was also the children's biological mother, and perhaps they needed this chance at reconciliation to become emotionally healthy adults. "You can come for dinner next Sunday," he decided. "And on the following Sundays too, if the children want to." "Really?" Jennifer couldn't believe it. "But I set the rules. You don't promise anything you can't keep. You don't criticize the way I raised them. And if Emily Grace says she doesn't want to see you anymore, you respect that. I accept everything." During the following months, Jennifer established a routine of Sunday visits. Gradually, she integrated into the family dynamic, helping in the kitchen, talking with Mrs. Dorothy, and participating in daily activities. Tyler was the first to lower his guard, showing genuine affection for his mother again. He began eagerly awaiting Sundays and telling Jennifer everything that happened during the week. Their reconciliation was natural and relatively quick. Emily Grace took much longer. For months, she maintained a formal cordiality with Jennifer, never showing open anger, but also never allowing emotional closeness. It was as if she had built an invisible wall protecting her heart from further disappointments. The turning point happened during a visit when Emily Grace had fallen ill with a severe flu. Jennifer offered to care for her, preparing teas, checking her temperature, and staying by the bed telling stories until the girl fell asleep. "Thank you," whispered Emily Grace, already half asleep. "For what?" asked Jennifer. "For staying, for not leaving when I got sick." It was the first time Emily Grace had shown emotional vulnerability toward her mother. Jennifer understood this was a precious and unique opportunity to begin rebuilding trust. "I will never leave without telling you again," promised Jennifer. "Even if we argue, even if you get mad at me, I will always be available when you need me. What if you get another boyfriend? He'll have to accept that my children come first, always." Gradually, Emily Grace began allowing Jennifer to participate more actively in her life. She showed her school projects, asked for help with math, and even shared some typical pre-teen worries. Marcus observed the children's transformation with mixed feelings. On one hand, he was happy to see them developing a healthy relationship with their mother. On the other hand, He felt a twinge of jealousy when they showed affection for Jennifer, as if it somehow diminished what they had built together. Mrs. Dorothy, with the wisdom of a woman who had raised children and grandchildren, helped Marcus process these complex emotions. "Love is not a limited resource," she said during a nighttime conversation in the backyard. "The children can love their mother without loving you any less. I know that in theory, but in practice it's harder. Are you afraid they'll choose her over you? Maybe. Marcus, you were with them during the worst time of their lives. You didn't abandon them when it would have been easier. That creates a bond no one can break." Mrs. Dorothy's words proved prophetic. As Jennifer became more present, the children did not diminish their affection for Marcus. On the contrary, they seemed more emotionally balanced, having access to both parents. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The honey business continued to prosper throughout this period. With 25 productive hives, they managed to establish supply contracts with 3 local restaurants, 2 health food stores, and even with a farm hotel that used organic honey for its distinctive breakfast. Emily Grace had become a little executive, managing production spreadsheets, controlling inventory, and even negotiating prices with customers. She demonstrated a natural aptitude for business that impressed all the adults around her. Tyler developed almost supernatural skills in handling the bees. He could identify problems in the hives just by the sound of the buzzing, knew exactly when a colony was ready for expansion, and had an incredible intuition for locating queen bees during inspections. "That boy is going to be a better beekeeper than my husband," commented Mrs. Dorothy, watching Tyler work. The financial success allowed Marcus to begin planning for gradual independence. He and Mrs. Dorothy talked about the possibility of him buying his own land and establishing his own hives, maintaining a business partnership but creating autonomy for his family. "You don't have to leave here," said Mrs. Dorothy. "This house is big enough for all of us." "I know, and I'm grateful for everything. But the children are growing up and maybe it's time for them to have a space of our own. What if it's difficult to start from scratch somewhere else?" "We've started from scratch once before. If it doesn't work out, we try again." Mrs. Dorothy understood Marcus's desire for independence. She herself had raised her children valuing autonomy and the pride of personal achievements. They agreed the move would happen gradually over the next 2 years, allowing the business to become even more established. During one of the Sunday visits, Jennifer made an unexpected proposal. "I got a job in Asheville," she announced, "at the municipal school's office. It doesn't pay much, but it's stable." "That's good," replied Marcus, not understanding where she was going with this. "I thought about renting a small house here in town, to be closer to the children." The proposal created an immediate tension in the room. Marcus didn't know how to react, and the children fell silent, processing the implications of the change. "You want them to live with you?" asked Marcus directly. "No, they're fine here, with you and Mrs. Dorothy. I just want to be nearby, to be more involved in their daily lives." "What if they want to stay with you sometimes?" "We can talk about that when it happens." Emily Grace, who had observed the whole conversation in silence, finally spoke up. "Mum, you won't leave again if it gets hard." It was the question everyone wanted to ask, but didn't have the courage. Jennifer looked directly into her daughter's eyes before answering. "Emily Grace, I can't promise life will be easy, but I can promise I will never abandon you again. Even if I need to move cities for work, you'll know where I am and how to find me." The answer seemed to satisfy Emily Grace, who simply nodded. Tyler was visibly excited about the prospect of having his mother living nearby. Jennifer found a simple house to rent, 15 minutes by car from Mrs. Dorothy's property. It was a modest place with 2 bedrooms, a living room, kitchen, and a small backyard, but it represented a fresh start for her and an opportunity to be truly present in her children's lives. Jennifer's move to Asheville brought positive changes for the whole family. The children began visiting her regularly, sometimes sleeping over on weekends. Jennifer attended school meetings, community events, and everyday activities she had missed during her period of absence. Marcus observed the transformations with complex feelings. On one hand, he was happy to see the children developing a healthy relationship with their mother. On the other hand, he had to deal with his own unresolved feelings toward Jennifer. They had never talked deeply about the reasons that led to the end of their marriage, beyond the abandonment. There were old issues, accumulated hurts, and even a physical attraction that had never completely disappeared. "Do you still love me?" asked Jennifer one afternoon while helping with the honey harvest. The question caught Marcus completely by surprise. They were alone in the shed, the children were at school, and Mrs. Dorothy had gone to town for groceries. "Jennifer, now is not the time to talk about this. When will it be time? Are we going to pretend forever that we're just the children's parents?" Marcus stopped what he was doing and looked at his ex-wife. She was more beautiful than ever, tanned from working outdoors, with a sparkle in her eyes that wasn't there when they met again. "I don't know what I feel for you," he admitted. "There's a lot unresolved between us." "Like what?" "Like the fact you abandoned me when I needed you most. Like the fact you chose another man over your family." Jennifer lowered her gaze, clearly ashamed. "I know I made terrible mistakes, but what if I could prove I've changed?" "How?" "By staying. No matter what happens, no matter what difficulties arise, I'm staying. I'll be here for you and for the kids." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Emily Grace and Tyler, who returned from school excited to talk about a science project they were developing. Marcus saved the conversation with Jennifer for later, but her words kept echoing in his mind. During the following weeks, Marcus observed Jennifer carefully, looking for signs that she had truly changed. She worked every day, helped with the children's expenses without being asked, and actively participated in all family activities. Most importantly, she demonstrated an emotional maturity she hadn't had before. When Emily Grace went through a difficult period of adjusting to adolescence, Jennifer knew how to give space and support in just the right measure. When Tyler had problems with bullying at school, she coordinated a response together with Marcus without creating unnecessary drama. "She really has changed," commented Mrs. Dorothy in a nighttime conversation in the backyard. "You think so?" "I see it in her eyes. Before, she was always looking elsewhere, as if she wanted to be somewhere else. Now she is present, truly." "And what if it's just a phase? What if she gets tired again?" "Life is all risk, Marcus, but sometimes we have to give people a chance to redeem themselves. The decisive moment came during an unexpected crisis. A mysterious illness attacked several hives simultaneously, killing thousands of bees and threatening the entire business they had built. Marcus panicked, seeing 2 years of work unravel in a matter of days. Jennifer was the one who took the initiative to seek specialized help. She found a veterinarian specializing in beekeeping in Charlotte, convinced him to come to the property, and organized an emergency plan to save the remaining hives. "Why are you doing this?" asked Marcus, as they worked day and night to implement the treatment for the sick bees. "Because this business isn't just yours, it's our family's, and I won't let our family lose what we've achieved." The word "our" deeply moved Marcus. She was referring to them as a unit, a team, a united family facing a challenge together. The treatment worked. They lost 4 hives but saved the other 21. The veterinarian taught prevention techniques that would avoid similar problems in the future. The business survived the crisis stronger than before. That night, after the children had gone to sleep and Mrs. Dorothy had retired to her quarters, Marcus and Jennifer were alone in the backyard, watching the stars and processing the intensity of the last few days. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For staying. For fighting instead of running when things got tough. I promised I wouldn't leave again, and I meant it." Marcus looked at Jennifer and felt something he hadn't felt in years. Trust. She had passed the first real test of adversity and hadn't run away. On the contrary, she had led the fight to save what they had built together. "Jennifer, I want to try again," he said, surprising himself with the words. "Really?" "Really. But it has to be different this time. We have to talk about everything, resolve the old issues, and build something new based on who we are now." Jennifer began to cry, not from sadness, but from relief and gratitude. "I want that more than anything in the world." They didn't kiss that night, Nor did they make grand romantic promises. They simply agreed to start dating again, slowly, as if they were two people getting to know each other for the first time. The children received the news with different reactions. Tyler was thrilled at the possibility of his parents getting back together. Emily Grace showed caution, but also a quiet relief at not having to divide her loyalties between her parents. "Aren't you going to fight again?" asked the girl during a family conversation. "We probably will fight sometimes," Marcus answered honestly, "but now we know that fights are resolved by talking, not by running away." "And what if it doesn't work?" "Then we keep being a family anyway," said Jennifer. "The difference is that now I won't leave if things get hard." The relationship between Marcus and Jennifer lasted 2 years. They were 2 years of mutual rediscovery, of deep conversations about the past, and of building a new foundation for their relationship. They went to couples therapy to resolve old issues and developed communication tools they didn't have before. Jennifer moved back into the guest house on Mrs. Dorothy's property, but kept her own room. The children gradually adapted to the new family dynamic, which included the constant presence of their mother without erasing the history of overcoming they had lived with their father. The honey business continued to grow. They expanded to 35 hives, diversified production to include propolis and beeswax, and established their own brand that was recognized throughout the greater New York area. Emily Grace, now 15, showed exceptional aptitude for administration and was already planning to study veterinary medicine with a specialization in beekeeping. Tyler, at 12, had developed a reputation as a bee whisperer and helped other beekeepers in the region with problems in their hives. Mrs. Dorothy, at 70, had found a new family and a new purpose in life. She treated Emily Grace and Tyler as grandchildren and had become the grandmother they never had. Her house had transformed into the center of an extended family that functioned in harmony. The marriage proposal happened during Emily Grace's 15th birthday party. Marcus had planned everything carefully, talking first with the children to make sure they supported the decision. "Jennifer Patterson Bennett," he said, kneeling in the middle of the party, in front of the entire community that had become his extended family. "Will you marry me again?" The entire party stopped to watch the moment. Jennifer cried, laughed, and shouted yes, several times, before she could form coherent words. Emily Grace and Tyler ran to hug their parents, creating a moment of pure family joy. The wedding was simple, held in the backyard of Mrs. Dorothy's property, under the trees that provided nectar for the bees that had saved the family. The local priest celebrated the ceremony, and the whole community joined the party that lasted until the early hours. "Do you believe in this?" Marcus asked Emily Grace and Tyler during the party. "I believe you'll stay together this time," answered Emily Grace, with the maturity of someone who had learned to value stability. "I always knew you'd get back together," said Tyler, with the innocent wisdom of a child. 5 years after the wedding, the Bennett family had established itself as one of the leading producers of organic honey in upstate New York. They had 50 hives, employed 3 workers, and sold products to over 100 retail points in 5 different cities. Emily Grace had finished high school as the top student in her class and earned a full scholarship to study veterinary medicine at Columbia University. Tyler, at 17, was already recognized as a beekeeping expert and gave lectures at industry conferences. Jennifer had completed a business administration course and become the official manager of the family business. Marcus handled production and the technical side, while she managed sales, marketing, and finances. Mrs. Dorothy, at 75 years old, still actively participated in all family activities, but had officially retired from the business responsibilities, dedicating herself to tending her garden and telling stories to the neighbors' grandchildren. That family's story had become a legend in the region. People from other towns came to visit the property, to meet the man who had lost everything, lived in the forest with his children, and then built a honey empire through determination and hard work. Marcus often received invitations to tell his story at schools, rural producers associations, and entrepreneurship events. He always accepted because he knew his experience could inspire other people going through similar hardships. "The secret was never giving up," he would say in those talks. "Even when it seemed there was no way out, we kept trying. And the forest, which seemed like an end, revealed itself as a new beginning. During one of these talks, a woman of about 40 years old approached him after the presentation. "My story is similar to yours," she said. "I lost my job, I lost my house. I'm living with my 2 children at my aunt's house. I don't know where to begin." Marcus looked into the eyes of that desperate mother and saw himself 10 years ago. "Start by believing it's possible," he replied, "and then take one step at a time. The forest always hides surprises for those who don't give up searching." That night at home, Marcus told Jennifer about the conversation with the woman. "Do you think we could help people like that?" she asked. "How?" "I don't know. Maybe create a mentorship program or offer job opportunities for families in difficult situations." The idea planted a seed in Marcus's mind. Over the following months, they developed a social project called New Start in the Forest, where families in vulnerable situations could learn beekeeping and receive support to establish their own businesses. The first group was composed of 5 families from the region who had lost jobs during the pandemic. Marcus and Jennifer taught beekeeping techniques, Mrs. Dorothy offered guidance on household management, and Emily Grace, on university break, helped with financial planning. "You are giving back to the community what you received," observed Mrs. Dorothy in a family conversation. "It's the least we can do," replied Jennifer. "We know what it's like to be desperate and without hope." The program was a success. Of the 5 initial families, 4 managed to establish sustainable beekeeping businesses. The 5th family discovered an aptitude for organic horticulture and set up a small vegetable cooperative. The Bennett family story spread beyond the region. They were invited to television programs, agribusiness magazines wrote articles about the business, and universities began studying the business model they had developed. "Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe this is all real," commented Marcus during an interview for a national magazine. "What changed between that desperate man in the forest and the successful businessman you are today?" asked the journalist. "My perspective on what failure is and what success is changed," he replied. "Before I thought I had failed when I lost my job and the house. Today I know that was just a redirection. The real failure would have been giving up on my children." The interview was published under the title, "From Forest to Success, the story of the family that transformed despair into prosperity." The article generated hundreds of comments from people sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity and thanking them for the inspiration. Emily Grace, now a licensed veterinarian, returned home after university to implement modern beekeeping techniques in the family business. She brought knowledge about bee genetics, digital monitoring systems, and sustainable production methods that increased productivity by 40%. Tyler took a different path. Despite his natural aptitude for beekeeping, he decided to study biology with a focus on environmental conservation. His goal was to create sanctuaries for Native American bees and educate rural producers about the importance of pollinator preservation. Each child followed their own path, but both remained connected to the bees, observed Mrs. Dorothy, now 80 years old, watching the family gathered for Sunday lunch. "They changed our lives," said Marcus. "It's only fair that we dedicate our lives to protecting them too." Mrs. Dorothy's property had transformed into a leading center for sustainable beekeeping. They received visitors from across the country interested in learning management techniques, university students conducting research, and international delegations studying American models of family farming. A memorial garden had been created on the site of the first hives Marcus discovered in the forest. A bronze plaque told the story of that family, honoring Mrs. Dorothy and her husband, and inspiring visitors with the message that every storm passes and after the storm always comes the honey. During the memorial's inauguration, the entire community gathered for a celebration. The mayor of Asheville gave a speech about how that family had become a symbol of resilience for the entire region. Representatives from rural producers' associations congratulated them on the social work they developed. But the most emotional moment was when Emily Grace and Tyler paid a spontaneous tribute to their parents. 10 years ago, our father took us to the forest because he had no other choice, said Emily Grace, speaking to the crowd. He could have given up, sent us to a shelter and tried to start over alone. But he chose to stay with us and fight for our family. And our mother, who had made a terrible mistake, had the courage to return and prove she had changed, continued Tyler. She could have kept pretending we didn't exist, but she chose to face her own shame and win back our love. That's why we want to tell all of you, they concluded together, that no matter how difficult your situation is today, it's always possible to start over. It's always possible to find the honey after the storm. The audience gave a standing ovation, many people crying with emotion. Marcus and Jennifer embraced, watching the children who had become admirable adults, remembering the abandoned cabin where it all began. Mrs. Dorothy, seated in the front row in her wheelchair, a reluctant concession to old age, smiled with pride. At 82, she had lived to see that family she saved also save her in return, giving meaning and joy to her final years. "My William would be proud," she murmured to herself, looking at the hives buzzing productively at the back of the property. That night, after all the guests had left, the family gathered in the backyard as they had every night for years. The children, now young adults, still loved hearing their parents' stories about the first days in the forest, about the first honey harvests, about the mistakes and successes that led them to prosperity. "Dad, do you regret anything?" asked Tyler, in one of those deep conversations that only happen in very close families. Marcus thought carefully before answering. "I regret going so long without work, before losing the house. I could have looked for alternatives sooner. But I don't regret taking you all to the forest. It was there that we discovered who we really were." "And you, Mum?" asked Emily Grace. "I regret abandoning you," replied Jennifer without hesitation. "It was the biggest mistake of my life, but I don't regret coming back and fighting to regain your trust, even knowing it might have been too late." "What about me?" joked Mrs. Dorothy. "Can I regret something too?" "What could you possibly regret?" asked Marcus, laughing. "Not having met you all sooner," she answered seriously. "My life became so much richer after you arrived." The stars shone intensely in the clear country sky. The gentle hum of bees from the hives created a natural melody that had become the soundtrack of their lives. The property was quiet and peaceful. "Do you think we'll stay happy like this?" asked Tyler, with the typical worry of someone who learned early that life can change quickly. "Happiness isn't a destination, son," replied Marcus. "It's a choice we make every day. The choice to be grateful for what we have, to fight for what we want, and to never give up on the people we love." "Even when it's hard?" asked Emily Grace. "Especially when it's hard," answered Jennifer. "It was in hardship that we discovered who we really are and what we're capable of." They stayed in the backyard until late, talking about plans for the future, remembering stories from the past, and enjoying the peace of the present. It was a family that had learned to value simple moments because they knew what it was like to live without them. The next morning, Marcus woke before dawn, as he had every day for 10 years. He put on his work clothes, laced up his boots, and walked to the hives for the routine morning inspection. The bees were already active, leaving the hives in search of nectar from the flowers Mrs. Dorothy had strategically planted around the property. It was a perfect cycle. The flowers provided food for the bees, which produced honey, and pollinated the plants, which produced more flowers. "Good morning, girls," he said to the bees, as he did every morning. He couldn't know that this greeting would be recorded by a documentary crew filming a program about sustainable family farming. The camera captured the exact moment Marcus greeted his bees with the affection of someone talking to old friends. "Cut!" shouted the director. "That was perfect. That's exactly what we want to show, the genuine connection between the farmer and nature." The documentary would air nationally 3 months later, bringing the Bennett family's story to millions of American homes. Marcus would receive hundreds of messages from people, thanking him for the inspiration and sharing their own stories of overcoming adversity. But that morning, he knew nothing of this. He was simply doing what he did every day, caring for the bees that had saved his family, working the land that had become his home, building a future based on honest work and unconditional love. Emily Grace joined him in inspecting the hives, already dressed in the white coveralls that had become her work uniform during her university break. Tyler appeared a few minutes later, carrying the smoker and the necessary tools. Jennifer and Mrs. Dorothy prepared breakfast while the other three worked with the bees. It was a routine that had repeated daily for years, creating a stability and predictability that contrasted dramatically with the chaos they had lived through a decade before. "Remember the first time we opened a hive?" asked Emily Grace, watching Tyler work easily among the bees. "I was so scared," admitted Marcus. "I thought they would attack me and I'd die from the stings." "I remember thinking that bees were like people," commented Tyler, "each with their own personality, their tasks, their goals." "And Mrs. Dorothy saying her father would be proud," added Emily Grace. They finished the morning inspection and walked back to the main house, where the smell of homemade bread and fresh coffee awaited them. It was just another normal morning in the life of an extraordinary family that had learned to find wealth in simplicity. End of story. Now tell me what you thought of this story and where you're following us from. If you have something to share with us, leave it in the comments with sincere words. Do you believe Marcus made the right decision by never giving up on his family? We would love to read your opinions. Thank you so much for your company. Don't forget to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories like this one.